one of the reasons why we focus on Sharia is it's clearly not a faith. Overwhelmingly, it is about jihad. It is about conquest. Because there were Hamas operatives in that founding meeting, the FBI wiretapped it. And what we learned subsequently in the course of the Holy Land Foundation trial, the largest terrorism financing trial in U.S. history, was CARE's operatives, the founders of it, said the purpose for creating CARE was to serve as a fundraising mechanism and PR arm, public relations arm, for Hamas. The conquest that Sharia commands is not just of the Middle East. It's not just of Europe or, for that matter, Africa or Latin America. It's the whole world. And the church has to take a role. If pastors will become knowledgeable, it will be incredibly important to getting the public equipped to understand it as well.
Frank, thank you for joining us today. You've been a real strong advocate for America first, and on top of it, and primarily you focus on Sharia law, banning Sharia law in the United States. And for the past few months, maybe a couple of years now, you have focused primarily on the state of Texas. And, we're here in Texas, and a lot is happening in Texas. We have a couple of hundred mosques that we did not see coming in the last 10 years or so. Tell me a little bit about you. And I just Googled you recently, and we met a few times, but and I saw the SPLC have a profile on you, CARE have a profile on you. People definitely know who you are and what you stand for. So let's talk about you first for a few seconds, then we'll go into the podcast itself.
Well, first, thank you, Abraham, for having me, and the opportunity to address all of these topics at some length is really appreciated. I've had the privilege of being involved in one aspect or another of national security policy for the better part of 5 decades now. Starting in the United States Senate, I worked for a Democrat by the name of Scoop Jackson, and then for a Republican by the name of John Tower. Famously, a senator from Texas. At the time he was the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, I worked for him on the professional staff for about 3 years, and then went to the Pentagon and worked for President Reagan there for about 4.5 years, most of it as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense with responsibility for nuclear forces and arms control policy, which was pretty much a big deal at the time, and then acted as an assistant secretary for the last 7 months with responsibility for that portfolio, plus U.S.-Soviet, U.S.-European relations more generally, which was a privilege of a lifetime.
That's awesome.
From that point forward till present time, I've been involved in one aspect or another of national security policy from outside the government in the so-called think tank space. I founded an organization called the Center for Security Policy and was involved with that for 37 years. And then about 2.5 years ago, started working on a new project called the Institute for the American Future, a project of which we call BanSharia.com. And Texas is very much center stage in the fight to prevent Sharia from subverting us from within. So I have been here a good bit, particularly came in for about a month and a half in connection with the campaign to secure an overwhelming vote for Proposition 10, which simply said, as you know, Texas should prohibit Sharia law.
Right.
And I'm delighted to say we got that crushing victory of
1.9
million Texans voted for it. Yes, 95 to 5.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second. So the Republican Party, the party actually have an option to put anything on the ballot. It's essentially a poll in a way. I mean, it doesn't become a law, but it drives the party's priorities for the next session. We have 90th session coming up, and I think this is going to be probably, at least I'm pushing for it, the number one priority at the convention, which is coming up in June 11 to 13. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and he asked me about Proposition 10 and why'd you do that? So I sign off on it and send it over to the SOS, and SOS puts it on the ballot and all of those good stuff. And I said, these are the main reasons. This is why we did this. And I said, we could either put that as number 1 or I want it as a number 10 because I don't want it in like number 7 or 8. You know, it doesn't fit. I said, it has to be something we have to be so important that you have to put it on either the top or the bottom. And we were talking about it. Then he said, what about property tax? And I said, I'm all in for property tax issue. This is a huge issue for Texas. Then at the end of the conversation, he said something. He said, Abraham, you're right. We have to be alive to pay property tax. You know, you can't be dead and worried about property tax. So you know, Prop 10 passed. 95% of the people supported it. Mm-hmm. I'm still trying to figure out who are the 5% who wanted Sharia law in Texas. I just cannot understand anyone, any Republican, saying that, oh, I'm okay with Sharia law in Texas. But which also tells us the Republican Party have a lot more work ahead of us to educate people, and one of the reasons you're here. So let's talk about Greg Abbott's designation of Muslim Brotherhood and CAIR as terrorist organizations. The governor decided to do that, and I think there's a lawsuit that's actually happening now. And tell me about that.
This was a singularly important step, and I give Greg Abbott great credit for taking it. The Muslim Brotherhood is the apparatus that adherence to Sharia, and maybe it's important to define that term. Sharia is, of course, a political, military, legal doctrine or ideology or system. You can characterize it in different ways.
You missed religious. You didn't say that. Why?
Well, I was going to say that it has a sort of patina of religiosity to it. But fundamentally,
it's really a political system.
It's about power. It's not about faith. But they use the faith as a vehicle for trying to ensure that it can continue to move inexorably into positions to subvert us from within.
Right.
Under the ground that it's a protected, faith. So our purpose is partly just to make sure people understand it's not a faith. It's I would call it toxic, totalitarian, and actually demonic death cult.
Yeah. Not
protected by our First Amendment, which would have the effect of destroying the Constitution if it were, in fact, to become, predominant.
Right. So let's talk about that. So if a faith goes, let's forget Muslim faith for now, right? I mean, if a new group of people call themselves a new faith and say, we are okay with marrying 9-year-olds. Our religion is
marrying them at 6.
That's right.
Consummating it at 9.
Right. And we're okay with hanging people because they don't believe in our religion. We're okay with blowing up buildings and killing people because our religion says so. That's not protected under the First Amendment.
That's right.
But Muslim faith in America is, and radical Muslim definitely is. How do we handle that?
Well, I don't think it is. And this is what I think is ultimately going to come out of this effort to ban Sharia, is we're going to have a fight about whether what we're dealing with is a protected religion under the First Amendment. Dwight Eisenhower, famous general and president, of course, once observed, you can't use the First Amendment to destroy the First Amendment. And that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
So we need to be clear about this, and this goes to your point. Yes, we do need to be educating not just the public, but also elected officials and judges as well into the nature of this thing. Their default setting is going to be, well, Islam is a faith, and therefore it's protected.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why we focus on Sharia is it's clearly not a faith. It's got some, as I say, some elements in which, it defines certain religious practices, yes. But overwhelmingly, it is about jihad. It is about conquest. Right. It is about requiring every adherent to engage, and this is a really important point, Abraham, to behave the way the perfect man behaved. That, of course, is Muhammad.
Yeah.
And, there's a mindset, if you will, or interrogatory.
Yeah.
what would Jesus do?
Right.
Well, we know that what Jesus would do would be
Right.
peaceable and tolerant and love your neighbor and turn the other
Right.
cheek and all that stuff.
Yeah.
What Muhammad did was all of the horrible things you just mentioned, plus countless others,
Yeah.
all of which, as I say, under Sharia, those who are deemed to be faithful are called to emulate every practice. So this creates the malevolent force that we're contending with
Yeah.
on the part of people. And it's not all Muslims. I want to be perfectly clear about that.
Yeah.
There are Muslims, and I think you know something about this, having
Yeah.
come from elsewhere.
India, right. Yeah.
You know, people flee Sharia. They come here to get away from it.
Right.
The problem is that the authorities of the faith
Yeah.
and their adherents have a name for those people.
That's true.
They're called apostates.
Okay.
And if you engage in apostasy under Sharia, that is a capital offense. So by and large, we don't hear from people who are Muslim but aren't with the Sharia program. They're
Right.
not helpful to us in countering it.
That's
I
interesting.
wish they were.
Because when we're at war with Iran now, and when that started 2 days after, I had a call here, and a guy called me and said, "Hey, I'm a Iranian. I'm a Republican. I want to talk to you for a minute." And we set up a lunch, and we had, we met for about an hour, and he told me that he said everything that you guys are doing now is the right thing. That regime is killing Muslims and won't let Muslims who disagree with them. They won't even let them leave. Like they're willing to. Like I'm out of this country, but they won't allow them to leave.
Well, they're more likely to kill them.
Yes, they're more likely to kill them. And he said, I'm a Muslim, but I don't go to mosque because the mosques in Richardson, Plano, all of these places have become a radicalized place for I can't just go anymore. I don't go to mosques. I'm not a practicing Muslim anymore, mainly because of that. And I don't think he's switching his religion, but he's definitely switched out from the radical side of the Muslim.
Well, and I think that's true of a vast majority of the population of Islam. In fact, of Iran rather, what you're hearing is that there are huge numbers of Muslims who've converted to Christianity in Islam. Yeah. And of the rest, they want no part of this regime. And it's Sharia, compulsion. Yeah. And that is one of the reasons why I believe the president is absolutely right to be seeking not just, better behavior on the part of these guys, not just the end of their nuclear weapons program, which is continuing, not just, ending their efforts to control and extort people over the Strait of Hormuz, but to actually bring about what needs to be done, which is the liberation of the people of Iran.
Right.
And I'm prayerful that that's what will be the ultimate outcome of all of this.
Outcome out of this, yeah. Let's talk about the Texas Board of Education. You were there. Thank you for flying in and spending your time and your money and your resources and to educate the members and also the grassroots. We had a huge win. You guys did a lot of work. Let's talk about that.
Well, I want to give credit particularly to Julie Pickering and Brandon Hall, who really carried the laboring oar in this particular fight. Yeah. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being part of
my job.
Impromptu,
Yes.
celebration of freedom. We thought it was going to be a press conference, but it turned out that the Council on American Islamic Relations was having a press conference outside. Yes. Exactly the same time, curiously enough. Just exactly. And all of the press was there covering their complaints rather than patriotic Americans. But we had a great celebration of freedom, and it was important to do so. That all came about because basically Julie and Brandon raised the alarm that what CARE had been doing.
Yeah.
And again, just to be clear, CARE is a designated terrorist organization by the governor of the state.
Right.
It is a part of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a terrorist organization as well.
Right.
It has been operating with impunity, despite all that, for decades since its founding.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, because there were Hamas operatives in that founding meeting, the FBI wiretapped it.
Okay.
And what we learned subsequently in the course of the Holy Land Foundation trial
I remember that.
here in Richardson, Texas,
Yeah.
The largest terrorism financing trial in U.S. history,
Yeah.
was CARE's operatives, the founders of it, said the purpose for creating CARE was to serve as a fundraising mechanism and PR arm for, public relations arm for Hamas,
Oh, wow.
a designated terrorist
That's
group.
it. I
Full
mean, it's
stop.
very simple agenda.
So-
and they're doing a pretty well job.
Oh, they've
honestly.
done a
Yeah.
hugely successful job. I mean, they're really the pit bull. You mentioned my SPLC
Right.
and CARE branding. It's
Yeah.
because we've been fighting, I think, effectively against them for
Oh, yeah.
many, many years. My point simply is this, that Governor Abbott, in his designation, set the stage for rejecting what CARE and its ilk, both, by the way, on the jihadi side, the Sharia supremacists, I call them,
Right.
and on the left, because there is a red-green axis that
Yeah.
operates in this
So-
country. They support each
Right.
other, even though they've got a lot of differences. What they've got in common is they want to tear down this country. They want to replace it with something else. And they have their differences as to what that should look like.
Yeah.
But for the moment, they're working absolutely seamlessly together.
So there's a group out of, I think it was Tarrant County. We talked about that, and I think it's actually had
Young
in my
Democrats.
notes. Young Democrats of Tarrant County. They have this petition going around to join the Red Green. The Marxist and the Islamist is coming together, and only because they have a common enemy, which is the United States and the regular people of our nation.
I haven't seen that petition. I'll go looking for it. But
Yeah,
what they
it's
did
a
do was
signature,
a statement the other day that was a product of
Yeah.
that red-green axis, in which they professed, these are young Democrats,
Right.
they professed that there's no problem with Sharia. And actually, anybody who says otherwise is misrepresenting Islam. And they went on to say that Islam does not teach, violence or terrorism or hatred towards other people.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry. That's exactly what it does under Sharia. It is about not only all of those things, it is about conquering and replacing the governments of nations like ours. And this is a key point. If that is your purpose,
Right.
if you are working with others to that end, you are engaged in a seditious conspiracy because you're trying to overthrow the government of the United States, full stop. So rather than being accommodated, rather than being endorsed by Democrats, young or old, or anybody else for that matter, these people ought to be rolled up.
Yeah.
And I think if they're foreign nationals, they should be deported. And if they're not, they should be prosecuted.
Yeah. There's a guy named Abu Ammar Yasser Qadi. He is a scholar out of the Plano Islamic Center. It's where the Epic Center won, I guess, basically. And their next project is Epic Center 2, which they renamed recently to a meadow. And I think I heard Governor Abbott jokingly say, we're going to keep that as a meadow and not let them build anything on it. But
That's a good idea.
I have videos him saying, we have conquered the state. We have conquered this nation. We are here in Texas. We're going to do this. So it's not no faith goes out and say, we're conquering this nation. Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, whatever, any other faith, they're not out to conquer anything. They're usually out to spread the gospel. They're usually, conquering is a word you use essentially in a war. That's pretty much it. And I've seen multiple imams do that. And I think this is the disconnect with, Muslims who actually likes United States or wherever they are, versus the radical Islamist ideology that's being pushed. There's.
But again, if I could just interrupt you,
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand what you rightly describe as a radical ideology isn't, sort of an alternative to another peaceable and tolerant ideology that's doing business as Islam.
Mm-hmm.
It is the authoritative program pursuant to Sharia, which every one of those imams or scholars or jurists or whatever you call them. And by the way, Yasser Qadi is not just another Islamic scholar or imam. He is, I can't remember what the title is, chairman or president of the Fiqh Council, which is a body of jurists working for the Muslim Brotherhood. And they call the shots. Those are the people who are the arbiters of what is consistent with Sharia. They issue the fatwas. They tell people what they can and can't do. So this is an extraordinarily powerful individual. And the fact that he is not only driving this agenda with, building a epic city and so on, but he is the guy who's telling you, we're conquering America, or we have conquered Texas or whatever. I mean, that's got a status in this community that is instructive. And whether it's true at the moment or not, it certainly is reinforcing what they know they are supposed to do. And that's what makes the stakes here in Texas so high. Why I'm spending time here, why Steve Bannon was spending time here, why lots of others of us are working, particularly natives of this state, on each of these fights, whether it's Julie Pickering and the school board, or whether it's the governor and CARE, or whether it's the Prop 10 vote. I mean, all of these are important efforts to change the trajectory from what has been sort of under the radar happening in this state. And most people have just not paid attention to it or not been clued up about it to see it.
Yeah. So, on a regular, if you ask a regular person, what's a mosque? They will say, well, it's a place of worship for the Muslims, which anyone could get behind that. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, we have churches, Hindus have temples, all the religion have their own versions. What they don't understand is mosques are not usually about worship. This is where they teach their kids how to hate America. No mosque is, that I know of, built on a normal structure. I mean, there are mosques they rent on a strip mall that I've seen, like regular building. Epic Center is not built like regular building. There's a house in my neighborhood that is not mosque, but they said it's going to be like the homeschool for the
madrasa.
It's a madrasa, right? So, and it's built on center blocks from top to bottom with rebar wires and concrete in between. So I actually talked to the chief of police in my neighborhood and said, do you guys have, if something happens in that building, can you guys handle it? And he said, no, the biggest thing they got is a car. Like, it's a small city. They're going to have someone come from either Plano or Dallas to help. And that would take 20, 30 minutes. It's not
easily.
So things have changed, and we haven't been paying attention for many years. Now we are at least talking about it. Governor is involved in it. I'm very, very excited about that because I think there are elected officials who can do a lot, and a lot of them won't. And I'm not always the governor's biggest supporter, but in this particular deal, he's come across as one of the guys who finally said, hey, no, we can't do this in Texas. We're not going to let you do that.
Look, as I said, I think his designation was a very big deal. Not least in designating both the Muslim Brotherhood and the Council on American Islamic Relations as terrorist organizations and transnational criminal ones. He said they're not going to be allowed to own real property in the state of Texas.
Right.
My only beef is the governor is talking the talk, but we urgently need him to walk the walk as well. And I'm working with a team that is helping him, I think, out of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, which has a lot of stroke with him, to try to give him some specific steps that could be taken. But to your point about the mosques, Abraham, this is so important. Again, if you think of it as a house of worship, you treat it as a place that is off limits.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
If you think about it in the way the perfect man, Muhammad, thought about it and practiced and used such facilities, they were community centers. In fact, in a lot of cases, even here in the States, if it's a Muslim Brotherhood operation, they call it the Islamic Center or the Islamic Society of Plano or Dallas or what have you. The point being, yes, there's some worship going on there periodically in a part of it. Yes, there is teaching of kids to hate America pursuant to Sharia. And yes, there are other things, not infrequently, if not in every case, certainly not infrequently, in which mosques serve a purpose that Muhammad very much enshrined in them.
Yeah.
They're arsenals. They're places where weapons are stored.
Right.
They're places where training in the use of weapons is done. They're places where the plan for that use, the conquest, the raids, whatever, is actually, pursued. So all of these are things that when you combine it with the fact that many of them are built like fortresses, bastions.
That makes sense.
It makes sense, and it makes it a threat.
Yeah.
And to some extent, what we're hearing is there's a frequent practice increasingly of emplacing these in proximity to police stations.
It's very interesting when you say that, because the epicenter in Plano is right next to it.
Not an accident, comrade, is what the Soviets used to say. And again, you might say, oh, well, there goes Gaffney, but that's the tradition. That is the historic practice. And I emphasize this idea that Muhammad's the perfect man because if everyone is called to emulate him, it's not irrelevant.
Right.
It's directly bearing on the threat that this can pose to us all.
Yeah. When John was here a few weeks ago, John mentioned something. He said, you ask any veteran or any active members of the military, if you were in Afghanistan, how did you treat the mosques? And they treat it as that's the place we're going to get shot at from as you're driving by.
Firing positions.
Yes, they are fortified. The windows are vertical. It's different. It's not normal. So that
or to the contrary,
that's for sure.
It is normal. It is normal in their tradition, and it is normal that would be what they're doing here as well. So I'm personally of the view that one of the things that the governor should be doing right now, consistent with his declaration, his designation, is to shut these places down.
Yeah,
they ought to be raided, and if in fact there's weapons stored there illegally, let alone the training and preparations for their use and all the rest of it, those are prosecutable offenses. And I think it starts with those imams, it starts with those scholars and clerics and so on. And in not a few cases, those are foreign nationals, and we ought to be sending them packing.
Right.
And otherwise, taking down the sort of the leadership of the operation as a first step to trying to protect our population from what they have in mind. Yeah. And I don't know if you got into this with John Guandolo when he spoke to you, but I know very much on his mind. And he's former FBI, he's former Marine, Special Marine Force Reconnaissance. He's very deeply steeped, not only in the theory, but in the practice of jihad. He thinks this could go violent at any time.
Right.
And frankly, I think is overdue.
Right.
Based upon some of the impetuses at work here. So I think this is not an academic conversation we're having. It's not an Islamophobic. It's not a xenophobic. It's, not animated by any hostility towards individual Muslims. This is just basic, first of all, common sense, frankly, but also understanding the nature of the threat we face from Sharia and its adherents.
Well, let's talk about what people can do. How do we combat this? I know a good amount of Republicans, at least the activist versions of the Republicans, are fairly involved in their churches. They're strong Christians. I don't hear our church preachers talk about this at all. I mean, they talk about it once in a while.
Some do.
Some do.
Increasingly they do, but not nearly enough.
The church
in fact, you asked a question a moment ago, or started to, I think, about a Turning Point USA conference here in the Dallas Metroplex this past week, in which 1,500 pastors came together to talk about the issue of Islam and the church. And I don't know how much detail, I was there for a bit of it, but I don't know how much detail, the part that I heard didn't get into it at all. But the question of getting the church to make a concerted effort to protect not just the church and not just its congregants, but Judeo-Christian civilization from what these guys have in mind. Because, as I guess we've been sort of at least implicitly talking about, the conquest that Sharia commands is not just of the Middle East, of Israel. It's not just of Europe, or for that matter, Africa or Latin America, or here. It's the whole world.
The whole world, yeah.
And the church has to take a role. And if it does, if pastors will become knowledgeable about what's going on here, it will be incredibly important to getting the public equipped to understand it as well. And I did want to say, I was, over the weekend, our mutual friend, Debbie Georgiadis, the Republican committee woman of this great state, threw together a fabulous day-long event. She called it the Texas Freedom Summit.
Yeah.
And I think the final speaker was a fellow by the name of Daniel Hayward, I believe, out of Fort Hood. He's a lead pastor there of Vigilant Church. And Dan has put together a 10-part course that he is making available to pastors. I'm going to go down on Wednesday and watch him tape the last of the segments. And he's simply trying to provide both biblically informed, but also strategically mindful information that would enable fellow pastors to play the kind of role that the Black Robe Regiment did in the founding of this nation, which is to say, understanding that there's a duty both to God and his flock, but also to the country. And that's where we are right now. It's on the line.
There is a Texas Sharia caucus by Brent Money now, and National
Sharia Free Texas Caucus, to be precise.
Yes. And Keith Self, my congressman, and Chip Roy have put together, and I think a lot of people have signed on to it now. And
I think they're approaching 70 members.
Yeah, it's going to be a strong caucus for both sides. We need it. We need to. I mean, I talked to Brent. Brent was on the podcast a few days ago, and he said, well, at this point, we're gathering information because the members don't know. Members hear about it in media, but they have no factual, consistent message that they can take in and convert that into laws. So they're going to do all of that. The convention is going to be one of the places we're going to do a lot of this work. I think there's going to be a lot of debate about this, and people want to make sure that we're on the right track. What else can we do?
Well, let me just say about Brent Money. He mentioned at an event that just these things are, popping up like mushrooms after the rain here in Texas, because there's such keen interest, as you say, at the convention. It'll be great if that can be addressed. Brent and Chip Roy and Keith Self and Brian Harrison joined Tommy Robinson, a man who has been a political prisoner, but also a leader, a freedom fighter in the UK, specifically calling attention to one of the most horrific practices of that perfect man, namely rape, and these gangs that have been engaged in it for 50 years. And by Tommy Robinson's estimates, it may be as many as 1 million British girls have been gang raped, enslaved, and otherwise tortured by mostly Pakistani males who are Muslim. Okay. And the thing that's so worrying about this, and what he made a point, Tommy Robinson made a point of impressing upon the audience on that occasion, was the government of Britain knew this was going on. In fact, it's going on even now in places like London, among other cities across the country, and did nothing. Effectively nothing. There have been a few prosecutions, but it's slaps on the wrist mostly. And what he warned of, Abraham, is that this is happening here now. We're now having rapes taking place here, as we have seen throughout the rest of Judeo-Christian civilized world. As to the question of what do we do about this, we've mounted a campaign. It basically started in the run-up to that Prop 10, but it's entered a new phase. I call it Operation Bayonet, because my friend Steve Bannon has this wonderful turn of phrase that politicians behave better when they feel the pointy end of that bayonet at their back. Yeah. Figuratively, of course. Right. So this is aimed at trying to get both that unbelievably impressive turnout, 1.9 million Texans voting for a ban on Sharia, translated into political movement, action. One aspect of which is to try to encourage and help the governor walk the walk. Right. Help others in elective office and appointive office, do the same. Because the hour is very late. But the other thing that we're really keen on, if I can just hold up this little card, it talks about a Sharia-free pledge. And what we're asking people in this audience and people across this state, and for that matter, people across this country, to ask of every elected official or candidate for elective office, will you take this pledge? Right. And it simply reads as follows: I pledge to the citizens of my district and the American people that I will oppose any and all efforts to impose Sharia law upon them. Now, I can't imagine that anybody who is willing to enter public office and honestly, faithfully take an oath that says, I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, or words to that effect, would have any problem taking an oath to oppose a doctrine that is trying to supplant our Constitution, in fact, destroy it. But yet we have those young fellows and girls, I guess, out of Tarrant County who are suggesting that as young Democrats, they're now going to support Sharia. And the devil take the hindmost with respect to our country. That's a defining issue, Abraham. And I am prayerful, when you ask what can be done about this, I am prayerful that in this second stage of the campaign, first stage was Prop 10, second stage of this Save Texas, Save America campaign is that we will make this into a defining and hopefully decisive voting issue in the fall elections in this state and across the country, and that it will be something that engages the American people, because in part along the trail they're going to learn what we're up against and just how dangerous, just how late the hour is, and they will become part of a movement. In fact, if you may indulge me one more minute, I am basically hopeful that here on this 250th anniversary of the founding of this country, which some, notably the New York Times and its 1619 Project, have discounted on the grounds that there was an original sin in our founding, which was slavery.
Right.
Well, they ignore the fact that there were people at that time who were trying to oppose slavery. There were people throughout the early part of the 1800s who were determined to oppose slavery. There became an abolitionist movement.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, I speak to you in your capacity of chairman of the Republican Party of Texas. They created the Republican Party
Just for that.
in 1854, 56. And they nominated a guy by the name of Abraham Lincoln in 1860
Yeah.
on a platform
Yeah.
of prohibiting slavery.
Yeah.
And it produced the Civil War,
Yeah.
and 650,000 deaths later,
Americans.
I believe we expiated that original sin. But what that was all about, it took another 100 years or so with civil rights movement and all the rest, but I think we've dispatched that kind of slavery in America, thank God. That was about freeing, I think at the height, 4 million Americans
Right.
from slavery, from bondage. What we're talking about now is the prospect that every single American
300
is
or
going
so.
to be enslaved
Yeah.
if these Sharia guys have their way. So we need what I would call the Abolish Slavery 2.0 movement in our time. And this little pledge, I think, can be a first step towards creating the political cohort of elected officials who have taken this pledge and who will be honor bound to act on it. And hopefully be held accountable by those bayonet guys,
Right.
in the country.
100%.
And get us to the point where we do not have to fear slavery. And this isn't a euphemism, by the way, as you know. Sharia is about slavery. There are people still practicing slavery, literally slavery. And why? In part because the perfect man was all about slavery. Sex slaves, other kinds, eunuchs, you name it. And that is what is still being practiced in significant parts of the Muslim world today.
Yeah.
It must not be allowed to happen here.
Frank, thank you for coming on and educating the viewers and the party. We got a lot of work to do, that's for sure.
We do.
And I'm glad you're on our side, and
I
you're
am
here
too.
in Texas, even though you don't live here. You're here in Texas a lot.
I'm trying to get here as fast as I can, as they say.
I hear you. It's a beautiful state.
We love it.
It's definitely worth saving. We have a beautiful country.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth saving. So
Well, and if we lose Texas,
Yeah.
we assuredly will lose the country. So it's not an option. This has to
Yeah,
be
it
done
is not.
starting here. I'm proud to be playing a small role, and thank you for your help in doing it, and for, I pray, a very successful convention where this does feature prominently and gives impetus to this idea that come election time this fall in this state and elsewhere across America, people will turn out and vote for freedom.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll make it. We just got a lot of work to do.
We do.
Thank you, sir.
God bless you.
Yeah.
Thank you.